Hello, I'm Robert Kelly, and today on Record All Monsters, Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, cinematic universes, and Godzilla's heel-face turn.
Centuries ago, the monster appeared in the skies of Mars. Within a month, the culture of Mars had been wiped out completely. The civilization on my planet had reached a stage of development which you people will not achieve for a long time. Centuries, at least. Today, because of the space monster, it is a dead world, dead and unpopulated.
Would be a bad situation if that creature came here to Earth.
It's worse. Because he's arrived.
This movie, for good or for ill, is really the beginning of what most people think of as a Godzilla movie. For me, this is a very good thing. In the 10 years since his debut, Godzilla had already softened considerably as a character, going from walking nuclear bomb in his first film to a more satirical and comedic take on that first incarnation, and then in Mothra vs. Godzilla, a general symbol of humanity's sins against nature and each other. Here we begin to see Godzilla begin his transformation into the hero of his own series. This decision was probably inevitable, but it was and is a controversial one, and the film's creative staff were split over it. Ishiro Honda, according to Steve Reifel and Ed Godziszewski's biography, was not happy with the overall direction that the film took with its monsters, saying, "I used the Peanuts as Mothra's interpreters, but even that was something I had to force myself to do. And the producer liked how it turned out, and was a big success." Special effects director Eiji Tsuburaya was happy with the new direction and was already beginning to realize the influence his work had on children. This change is brought on because we get a new monster, an alien dragon from Venus, or Mars if you're watching the American version, called King Ghidorah, who would go on to be considered Godzilla's greatest enemy. Ghidorah is a spectacular creation, a golden three-headed space dragon with two tails who cries out a different high-pitched chirp from each head and shoots lightning-like gravity beams from his mouths. He was designed by Tsuburaya apprentice and future special effects director in his own right, Akira Watanabe. According to August Dragone's book on Tsuburaya, Watanabe's influences were primarily Chinese dragons and the folkloric eight-headed Japanese dragon, Yamata no Orochi. Tsuburaya wanted the monster painted bright red, but he and his crew eventually decided that gold would be the most impressive color on screen. Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster was the second Godzilla film of 1964, having been rushed into production when Toho's New Year blockbuster, Akira Kurosawa's Redbeard, ran into some production trouble and was delayed. Something needed to fill the slot. This would be the only time two live-action Godzilla movies would be produced in the same year. The big innovation here is the fact that there are three monsters who had each starred in their own films, all coming together. True, Godzilla had fought Mothra earlier that year, but the mere fact that all of Toho's giant monsters, with the exception of Varan, were in this one movie, and that was definitely impressive and surprising. This wasn't totally unheard of, though. In 1943, Universal Pictures put two of its most popular monster franchises together in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, and established that these movies shared a very loose continuity. From there, they piled on Dracula for 1944's House of Frankenstein and 1945's House of Dracula, which shared almost no continuity between them. Cinematic universes are all the rage nowadays, thanks to the success of Disney and Marvel's Avengers film series. The approach they take is hyper-focused on making sure the details from film to film line up with each other, but the Universal horror cycle and Godzilla's Showa-era films are much less scrupulous in this regard. We have the same actors playing different roles from film to film, details and locations changing in between sequels, and it's all done with a straight face. These crossovers were little treats, almost surprises, if the films hadn't been marketed on the number of monsters appearing in them, that is. In today's guest book, The Lost Films Big Book of Japanese Monster Movies, John LeMay speculates that Ghidorah grew from the concept of having a straight versus film between Godzilla and Rodan, and that Honda and Company went above and beyond in bringing in Mothra, and also introducing a new monster in King Ghidorah. The concept of adding more and more monsters would hit its peak in 1968 with Destroy All Monsters, which included almost every monster in the Toho stable up to that point, 11 in total. But we're not talking about that one just yet. We're talking about how Ghidorah the three-headed monster laid the groundwork for the rest of the series, from its highest highs and down to its lowest lows. But, for the time being, the film has the most spectacle from one of Toho's monster flicks, and in the Godzilla franchise in particular. We've discussed 3 Godzilla movies in a row, but he's going to take a little bit of a break. And next time, we'll meet a new monster, who is also an old monster, who gets a uniquely Japanese spin.
Nothing the screen has ever shown before can surpass the thrills of Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. Created from an atomic fireball hurled from outer space, Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, threatens man's very existence on Earth. Three-headed monster battles Godzilla, Mothra, and Rodan for mastery of the world. Men quake before the terror of their unleashed fury. All new, all never to be forgotten. A new high in screen terror. Three-headed monster.
Hello, I'm Robert Kelly, host and writer of Record All Monsters, and this is an ad for Anchor. That's right, it's an ad for Anchor, and if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. I was really intimidated at first to start this show until I heard about Anchor, and there were a few things that made me feel more at ease to begin. First of all, it's free. They have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, and Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so that it can be heard on a number of platforms, including whichever one you're listening to it on right now. You can even make a little money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And even their ads are easy. The mandatory call to action is something I can state freely. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Doesn't that feel good? This has been an ad for Anchor, and I've been Robert Kelly, host and writer of Record All Monsters.
Hello.
Hey, Robert.
Hey, John.
Gee, I guess you can hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear perfectly, actually.
Okay, great. Yeah, like it just suddenly occurred to me that little hole might be filled with dirt, so I just got a toothpick and I figured out that was the problem. So
All right, well, it's good to talk to you again.
yeah, you too. I really enjoyed it last time, so I'm looking forward to it.
I'm glad to hear it. So did you want to launch into the interview first, or did you want to do the little copy for the awards?
I think I'd like to do the copy for the awards first.
Okay. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
And I'm not just reading the names, right? I'm reading the whole thing where it's like, while subtitles are both easier to produce and all that.
Yes, if you want to. I mean, you don't have to, but
No,
I would
I
like
will.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me get up close so I can read it. Yeah. So, and you're just recording this whole thing, so it's not like
Yeah,
you have
I just record the
okay.
whole conversation, then chop it up when I finish.
Okay. Okay. Well, yeah, I'm ready to go. Got the email in front of me, so I can just read it. So,
Oh, great.
okay. While subtitles are both easier to produce and often more respectful to the original work, film dubbing is an art all its own. When done poorly, it can be the cause of derision and condemn a film to obscurity at worst and notoriety at best. However, when done well, a dub can make a film connect with an audience it otherwise may not have found. The nominees for Best Dub are Godzilla, King of the Monsters, Godzilla vs. The Thing, Mothra vs. Godzilla AIP dub, Ghidorah, the Three-Headed Monster, Frankenstein Conquers the World, and War of the Monsters, Gamera vs. Barugon AIP dub.
All right, that's great. And if you could also, if you wouldn't mind reading just the names of the films again, and the winner is, and I'll edit it together when I get who the winner is.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Godzilla, King of the Monsters, Godzilla vs. The Thing, Mothra vs. Godzilla AIP dub, Ghidorah, the Three-Headed Monster, Frankenstein Conquers the World, War of the Monsters, Gamera vs. Barugon AIP dub, and the winner is.
All right, John, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Hello, I'm Robert Kelly. Welcome back to Record All Monsters, and we're here with a returning guest, friend of the show, John LeMay, author and historian. How you doing, John?
Hey, Robert, I'm glad to be back because I had a great time last time.
Oh well, you know your episode is one of our most popular, so we're the audience liked you as much as I did, so we're glad you're back.
And it was an episode on Duran too, wasn't it?
Yes, so
That's pretty obscure.
yeah, no, and people liked it. Got some good feedback on it. So today we're here to talk about a movie that's not quite as obscure and definitely better. We're here to talk about Ghidorah, the Three-Headed Monster from 1964. First of all, what do you think of this movie, John?
I think for me, when I was a kid, and this was before I discovered the Heisei films, for me, Ghidorah, the Three-Headed Monster was probably one of my top three Godzilla movies. Just because it's a lot of fun. I liked how the monsters connected to the human storyline, like through the Shobijin, and how they kind of acted as translators for the monsters. I loved how Godzilla and Rodan accidentally save Princess Salno's life when Rodan just drops Godzilla on that big electrical tower. And I just love the fact that Godzilla becomes a good guy. I always enjoy storylines where villains end up becoming a hero, and so that was a huge turning point for Godzilla. So that's really the big takeaways for me from that movie.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Godzilla's turning into a hero because that's one of the big talking points we have on this episode. That's one of the things I really love about this movie too. This was probably the one I rented the most from our local video store. And I think it was one of the only Godzilla movies we had like 2 or 3 copies of at the store.
Well, you're definitely same generation as me because again, that was a rental thing. I that was one of those movies I didn't see for sale on VHS, and I remember having to rent it quite a bit, just like you.
Yeah, no, the only ones I ever saw for sale were Godzilla versus Megalon and Son of Godzilla, and those were actually the only tapes I owned.
Wow.
So you just wrote a book that came out earlier this year, Editing Japanese Monsters, that talks about the differences between the U.S. and original Japanese versions of these movies. So the original version of Ghidorah the three-headed monster, or three giant monsters, as they called it originally. Which of the two, which do you prefer?
I think the US version is actually edited better. You don't really miss that much that I can recall. But what I like that they did is a big difference is when Shindo is having his shootout with the assassin named Malnus at the very end. I believe in Toho's version, you can't hear the monsters in the background, but the English language dubbers had the good sense to add in the monster battle sound effects kind of in the distance, so that way there wasn't as big of a disconnect. And they did rescore some of the movie and took out some of Iwakube's original tracks, but the new music that they inserted into it is actually so well done. I didn't know for years and years that that was even not Iwakube's music. I thought that was his, So I think I mean, if you're a purist and you just have to watch the Japanese version for whatever reason, I mean, I understand, but for me, I think the US cut just has better pacing, and the deleted scenes aren't really anything to mourn. I think the biggest deleted scene is a second musical number from the Shobijin, but that's about it.
Mm-hmm. I also didn't know about the music actually until I was reading the section in your book, and then I went back and watched the scenes you described, and yeah, sure enough.
Yeah, and I would
But
like to shout out to Toho Kingdom for that. They were the ones who discovered that music, and I think I learned all that from them. And they have the track names, the artist, and everything. So if you want to know more about the music of Ghidorah, the U.S. cut, it's on Toho Kingdom.
that in the description. Um, yeah. So we were talking about one of the scenes that was rescored, and then a lot of the fight between Godzilla and Rodan was reshuffled in the editing. You've also speculated in a few places that this film grew from a Godzilla versus Rodan concept. Can you elaborate on that a little?
Sure, to me that just makes the most sense that they did Godzilla versus Kong, Godzilla versus Mothra, and then it's kind of like all of a sudden they break the formula of the past three films and they have all these monsters in there together. But one of the big reasons I feel like they were thinking about Godzilla versus Rodan comes from a totally different Lost film. The ending of continuation King Kong versus Godzilla was supposed to end with Godzilla and Kong fighting at Mount Aso, and both monsters fall into Mount Aso and become entombed in the lava. So to me, I halfway wonder if Shinichi Sekizawa, who wrote that continuation, if he was already thinking of the next sequel and just thinking, well, Godzilla and Rodan can both emerge from Mount Aso in the next movie and they'll fight. But yeah, that's what I like about Ghidorah is it is kind of like two films in one. I feel like Godzilla versus Rodan is like a mini movie within, Ghidorah the three-headed monster, and it just makes the movie seem that much more grand.
Yeah, and I think in kind of the popular imagination, this movie does kind of fill the role of Godzilla versus Rodan. I've talked to people in the course of doing this show who swear that they saw Godzilla versus Rodan and that it was one of the 60s movies and it was one of the big expensive ones. And
Yeah, well, and it's kind of fun to bring up when John Belushi did his bumper segments for Godzilla versus Megalon, where John Belushi plays Godzilla. Godzilla says how Godzilla versus Megalon's much better than my older films like Godzilla versus Rodan. So I think that really helped to perpetuate that myth.
now, so since it's possible that they were working from a Godzilla versus Rodan concept, what do you think made them decide to bring in a new monster and one as complicated as King Ghidorah?
I have no idea. I actually, from the best that I can tell, what they were really working on in 1964 after Mothra versus Godzilla was Godzilla versus Frankenstein. And it was a co-production with UPA, and that meant they needed UPA's approval for everything. And how Ghidorah really came about was Akira Kurosawa was making a movie called Redbeard, and that was supposed to be Toho's crucial like money-making big hit for the December New Year's season, and it got delayed in its production, and Toho was kind of scrambling for something to replace it. So they decided to just do another Godzilla movie really quick, and I think because they would have needed UPA's approval every step of the way for the Frankenstein concept, they just did away with that and decided to do something new and original. And I'm sure Godzilla versus Rodan got talked about, and then maybe someone felt like that wasn't big enough. And all I know is supposedly Tomoyuki Tanaka brought in a book on Greek myths, and he put out a picture of the Hydra, and they went from there. As that's actually what one Japanese source said, and another one said it was inspired by some Russian movie. I think it's called The Sword and the Dragon, which had a three-headed dragon monster in it. But I mean, there's a lot of different reports as to how Ghidorah came to be and what it looked like initially, and lots of people argue with each other about whether or not it's true.
And another thing people argue about is Ghidorah's coloring. Some people say that he was initially painted blue.
Yeah, and so my friend and I, Kyle Bird, have talked about that quite a bit, and Kyle dug into that, and I think he found the real answer to that, which I can't remember what it was. There definitely are pictures that appear to show the suit and it looks blue, but I think I've also heard that it was just the tinting of the photograph made it look blue. Whether it was or not, though, I know they made a kind of a rainbow-colored King Ghidorah figure that I really wish I would have bought from the Bandai Museum or whatever it's called. Did you get one of those?
It was in between paychecks, and it was just not going to happen.
But I really wanted to grab that.
Yeah, and I thought I was going to get it at G-Fest, and then, well, it happened there, so.
Yeah.
Big aspect of this movie,
and one we've talked about so far in this episode, is the crossover. You have Godzilla, Mothra, and Rodan, who'd all been in their own films, and Godzilla and Mothra had crossed over already, but having all three and then a new
monster. Basically a heel face
turn for Godzilla. What do you think inspired them?
Was it
like trying to make it big enough for the New Year blockbuster?
That's a good thought, Robert, because I mean they already did. Mothra versus Godzilla came out April of that year, and it was just, even though it was one of the best, it was just simply Godzilla fighting another giant monster. So maybe that was their thought process, was we already did that this year, so if we're gonna increase our ticket sales, we need to show something different. So maybe that was the idea. But I'm whatever the reason, I'm sure glad they did it, because I'm a big fan of continuity in film series, and it really has great continuity between Rodan and Mothra versus Godzilla, and it's a lot like today's Marvel films. And I think they also handled their crossover a little bit better than Universal had done in the past in their House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula films.
The Universal horror cycle crossovers had any influence on how they chose to do this, or?
I would certainly think so, but I'm not sure if Sekizawa or the creative people at Toho were fans of those films or what. Although we were just talking about how the film began as Godzilla versus Frankenstein, so I don't know, maybe Frankenstein was on their mind and they thought of House of Frankenstein and figured, why shouldn't we try that? Who knows?
And the continuity of the Showa era, this is the first real kind of stab at it. I know, because Mothra versus Godzilla didn't really show off much of it. They were just kind of like, oh yeah, these two monsters. But now we have, what disappeared in this region, Rodan's still in Mount Aso. But it's still pretty loose continuity, and it would be throughout the Showa era. And then
and it's very tight continuity.
Just changing times, or why would they make continuity more of a concern over time?
So I think the reason why Mothra versus Godzilla and Ghidorah have closer continuity compared to a lot of the other entries is just that they were made so close together. So maybe Toho felt like they just had to address, certain things like where is the other baby Mothra, and they just kind of simply say, "Oh, it died." But by the time we get to the next movie, continuity is very loose. It's set, I think, in like 1960X, and people are in space, and it's just totally different. And I think though back then, screenwriters just weren't concerned about continuity. There wasn't like the big fan culture we have today that was connected by the internet where people would constantly be debating this stuff. And they weren't on home video either, so audience memories were quite a bit shorter, But Toho, they were still better, I think, than Universal was in terms of their continuity. Their continuity was really pretty bad between like House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula. There's really a lot of unsolved mysteries if you watch those two films back to back. But as to the Heisei series, I think it was just the changing times of cinema. People expected more continuity in that era, so Toho was more mindful of it by then.
Mm-hmm. Well, did you have any final thoughts on this film? Do you recommend it? Any kaiju movies outside the Godzilla franchise for people who like it? What else they might like?
I just don't see how anyone could not like Ghidorah the three-headed monster, just because it has such a cheerable moment where Godzilla feels sorry for that little baby Mothra and comes to help her. I mean, you can say it's goofy for a monster movie, but who cares? I mean, it's just so much fun. But um yeah, I mean, I think that would be my final statement on that film, and I can't really think of like similar monster movies to recommend, I guess.
It kind of set the tone, going forward for the rest of the genre, even more so than King Kong versus Godzilla.
Yeah, I mean, even to this day, I find it really intriguing that the MonsterVerse depicts Godzilla as a hero.
Right. It's almost like the movie did so much to define how Godzilla is just conceived of in the popular consciousness.
Yeah.
And I guess we'll end the interview portion on that note, and then we will get to this episode's game show, which is called When Worlds Collide. And this time, your book was not my source material, so you may have a more difficult time.
I look forward to it.
All right.
They are the legendary creatures that rose at the dawn of cinema. Monochrome ghouls that forever haunt our collective imaginations. But have you heard all of their terrifying tales? Sweep away the cobwebs. Peek into the ancient tomb. From the author of the Lost Films magazine and Jaws Unmade comes Classic Monsters Unmade Volume 1. Over 400 pages chronicling the lost and unproduced motion pictures of Frankenstein, Dracula, the Mummy, and other classic monstrosities. You will witness the cursed war of Wolfman versus Dracula. Hear the return of the Phantom of the Opera and unleash the horrors contained within the brain of Frankenstein. Discover all this and more in Classic Monsters Unmade Volume 1 by John LeMay. Available now on Amazon.com.
Welcome back to Record All Monsters, and we're here with a special guest, John LeMay, author and historian. You still doing okay there, John?
I'm still with us. I'm still here.
All right. Now, today's game is called When Worlds Collide, and it's about bizarre crossovers. Today's film brought three of one studio's most famous characters together and introduced a new one. This happens pretty much every day in major studio movies now, but for the longest time, these sorts of meetings between intellectual properties took place only in our imaginations and in pop culture peripheries like tie-in comic books and Saturday morning cartoons. This has led to some strange team-ups and crossovers through the years, some so strange you'd swear I'm making them up, so I made some up. In today's game, When Worlds Collide, I'll propose a ridiculous crossover, and you tell me if you think it really happened in some official form or not. If you're right, hey, good for you. If you're wrong, well, that's too bad. Lucky for you, there are no prizes or penalties. Conversely, there are also no penalties or prizes. So, are you ready to play?
I'm ready.
All right. First question. Have Spider-Man and Captain Crunch ever crossed over?
I'll say yes.
You are right, John. In 1985, Quaker Oats, the owner of Captain Crunch, ran an ad campaign in Marvel comic books where kids would use clues from the back of cereal boxes to help Spider-Man find a missing naval officer.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Just my gut instinct said yes.
Well, your gut led you the right way. And this one, okay. So I lied, said not that my questions weren't based off information I got from your books. This one is. There have been a bunch of weird Batman crossovers, but was one of them with Godzilla?
Yes, and with Dracula as well. That's something I'm working on right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, before the cartoon, there was Batman fights Dracula from the Philippines in 1967. And coincidentally, same year that they were thinking about Batman meets Godzilla. So that's kind of funny.
Wow, that's see, I think this is part of why I know it's part of why I like talking to you. I think it's part of the guests liked it too. You always bring the goods, John.
Thank you.
All right, so you're 2 for 2. Next question. Has Ash from the Evil Dead series ever clashed with Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees?
I want to say not in a film, but like in a comic book or something. I don't know.
Well, the answer is no. So far, there has been no official that I
Wow.
could find. Nothing official, but they did come close to making one in 2008. It just never really got outside of talks.
Wow. I really thought there had been a comic book, but
I had thought so too, but I couldn't find any evidence of it when I was researching these questions. All right, question 4. Has Batman ever met Hellboy?
Well, I'll go ahead and say yes to that one too in a comic book.
Yes, he has. There's a crossover written and drawn by Mike Mignola where they teamed up to locate the superhero Starman who'd been kidnapped by neo-Nazis.
Yeah, Batman's met everybody. He's met the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Godzilla, Dracula.
And our final question takes us outside the realm of comic books and into the realm of sitcoms. Have Ray Barone from Everybody Loves Raymond and Fran Fine from The Nanny ever met?
Oh, okay, you got me. I watch Everybody Loves Raymond, and I know he crossed over onto King of Queens as Raymond, but I don't think he ever officially. I don't think that Ray Barone met the nanny. I don't know about the actors being in something together, but I don't believe Ray Barone ever met the nanny.
Well, he did in the 1998 episode of The Nanny. She runs into him at their high school reunion. And
she's actually playing the nanny character?
Yeah, it's on an episode of The Nanny, and it's Everybody Loves Raymond was in its second season, I think, and they were trying to cross promote it.
Wow.
And so Ray Barone went to her high school, and he's at the reunion. So
The Nanny, King of Queens, and Everybody Loves Raymond are all like a shared universe. Wow.
Yeah. And Ray Romano and Fran Drescher were actual high school classmates. They graduated from the Hillcrest High School in Jamaica, New York.
Interesting.
So that's our game. You got 3 out of 2. So congratulations. Once again, you win. And so we already talked about editing Japanese monsters. That's out for our audience. You got anything else in the works right now? You brought up something about Batman meets Dracula.
Yeah, so I think listeners will find this of interest. I did the same thing that I did with the Lost Films book. I applied that to Dracula and Frankenstein. So I've got Classic Monsters Unmade Volume 1 out. It goes from 1899 to 1955. Just a bunch of unproduced classic monster type scripts. And right now I'm working on Volume 2, hopefully to be out this summer, which, contains the movie I was talking about called Batman Fights Dracula, as well as a bunch of unmade Hammer scripts like Dracula and the Curse of Kali and Frankenstein and the Monster. So lots of interesting stuff in the works there.
And you still have the Facebook page?
Yes, yeah, and thanks for that. Reminds me of the fanzine. I don't think I had that last time I was on the show. So if you like Lost Film stuff, I've got the Lost Films fanzine, which isn't, just Godzilla. It is heavily genre, but I mean it's James Bond, Hammer, anything that's lost might go in the fanzine. So that's something that's ongoing.
Issue, wasn't that specifically on giant monsters, Gorgo, Reptilicus, and Conga?
Yeah, and well, that's the thing. I have the Lost Films fanzine, then I have a little spin-off magazine on the side called Movie Milestones, and that one centered on the 60th anniversary of, like you said, Gorgo, Conga, and Reptilicus.
Well, John, it was a pleasure to have you on as always. We hope to have you back again. And just once again, thank you.
Yeah, I'll come back anytime. Just let me know.
All right, I definitely will.
All right, thank you, Robert.
Yeah, thank you, John.
So that was our second interview with John LeMay. He's a lot of fun to talk to, great guy, and we will definitely be having him back in our second season. We're booked for the rest of this first season in a couple episodes. We're coming up on the end. This is number 15. And we'll be getting to Frankenstein Conquers the World, Gamera, Godzilla vs. Monster Zero or Invasion of Astro Monster, and then Magic Serpent, I think. In any case, wanted to shout out our friend, you know the guy. He's been on a couple of times, Austin Forbear, Douglas Ford. He needs a little help with the thing. He's getting some repairs done to his car that are fairly urgent, and he needs a little help. He has set up a GoFundMe. I have the link in the description. We live in a part of Texas where there is no public transportation to speak of. And Austin, he's starting a new job in another town. So any little bit you can give helps. If everyone who listens to this show gave $1, it would not be enough. But the link's in the description. So if you can afford to help Austin out a little bit, I'd really appreciate it. I know he'd really appreciate it. And beyond that, if you want to contact the show, you can reach us at Record All Monsters Podcast on Facebook. You can reach us at Monsters Record on Twitter. You can reach us at recordallmonsters.pod on Instagram. We have an email address. Get your stuff in for the upcoming Monster Mailbag number 7. It will be our final Monster Mailbag of Season 1. They're not quite quick looks, but they are specials, essentially. We have some specials coming up, special bonus episodes that look at some tangential media. They're like overgrown quick looks. And with that, I guess I'll remind you that monsters are your friends.